Mr. Morrison, you need to get out of this cabin, now. The building inspector's voice was barely above a whisper as he stood in my doorway, his clipboard trembling slightly in his hands. I looked up from the deck I was sanding, confused. I'm sorry, what? He glanced over his shoulder toward the driveway, then stepped closer. Sir, I know this sounds crazy, but I need you to listen very carefully. Your son called for this inspection, right? Said you wanted to make sure everything was structurally sound before winter? That's right. Marcus has been worried about me staying up here alone. Said the cabin's getting old, like me. I tried to smile, but something in the inspector's eyes stopped me. Mr. Morrison, I've been doing this for 23 years. I know the difference between age and sabotage. He pulled out his phone, hands shaking as he swiped through photos. These support beams in your basement? Someone deliberately cut them nearly through. One good snowstorm, maybe even a strong wind, and this whole structure comes down. Whoever did this wanted it to look like an accident, but they wanted to make sure it happened. The sanding block slipped from my fingers and clattered on the wooden planks. I stared at the photos on his phone, at the clean saw marks on beams that should have been solid, at the careful precision of someone who knew exactly how much to cut without the whole thing collapsing immediately. I have to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. The inspector continued, his voice low. Is your son in your will? Does he know about this property? The question hit me like a physical blow. I thought about Marcus's sudden interest in my well-being over the past few months, the way he'd insisted I spend more time at the cabin, how he'd even helped me stock the pantry for an extended stay, saying I deserved peace and quiet after 45 years of swinging a hammer, how his wife Janet had been so supportive, even offering to handle some of my banking to make things easier. I need to make a call, the inspector said, but first, we need to get you somewhere safe. My name is Robert Morrison. I'm 67 years old, and up until 15 minutes ago, I thought my son loved me. Let me back up 6 months. My wife Ellen died after 38 years of marriage. Pancreatic cancer took her in 4 months from diagnosis to funeral. Marcus was there through all of it, or so I thought. He showed up at the hospital, sat through the memorial service, helped me sort through her things. He seemed like the son I'd raised, the boy who used to hand me tools in the garage and ask 1,000 questions about how things were built. But looking back now, I can see the exact moment things changed. It was 3 weeks after Ellen's funeral. Marcus and Janet came over with dinner and condolences. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one I'd built when Marcus was in elementary school, and Janet casually asked about my estate planning. Dad, Marcus is just worried about you, she'd said, touching my hand with perfectly manicured nails. You're all alone now. We want to make sure you're taken care of. And we want to make sure Ellen's wishes are honored. I'd brushed it off. Told them I had a will. Everything was in order. No need to worry. What I didn't tell them was that, yes, Marcus would inherit the cabin and most of my savings. But there was also a clause about my tools, my workshop, going to the Habitat for Humanity program I'd volunteered with for years. Ellen and I had agreed on that years ago. The cabin had been our dream. We'd bought this 5-acre plot in northern New Hampshire 30 years ago, and I'd spent weekends and vacations building it myself. Every beam, every board, every nail. Ellen had picked out the windows, designed the kitchen, painted the walls. It wasn't worth millions, but the land alone was valuable. Prime lakefront property. Developers had been sniffing around for years. After Ellen died, I'd spent more and more time here. It was the only place I felt close to her, where every corner held a memory. Marcus knew that. He'd even encouraged it. Take all the time you need, Dad, he'd said. Get away from the empty house in town. The cabin is perfect for you right now. Now, standing in that cabin with a building inspector, showing me evidence that my own son had tried to kill me, I felt something inside me crack. Not break, exactly. More like the careful separation of wood along a grain line, a clean split that revealed everything underneath. I'm calling the police. The inspector, whose badge read James Kowalski, said firmly. No. The word came out harder than I intended. Not yet. Mr. Morrison, this is attempted murder. I know what it is. I looked at the photos again, at the precision of those cuts. Marcus had learned carpentry from me. I'd taught him how to read a structure, how to find the load-bearing points, how to make a cut look natural. I'd taught him everything he was using to try to kill me, but I need proof it was him. Right now, all we have is sabotage. Could have been anyone with access to the cabin. Your son has keys? My son has keys, I confirmed. So does his wife. I gave them copies years ago. James studied me carefully. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I need to know the truth. All of it. Why now? Why this way? I met his eyes. And I'm thinking, I need your help. Over the next hour, James and I formed an unlikely alliance. He agreed to file his report stating the cabin needed immediate structural repairs but was still temporarily safe with proper precautions. He recommended I stay elsewhere while he conducted a more thorough inspection over the next week. In reality, he'd be documenting everything with photos and measurements that would hold up in court. I, meanwhile, would go back to my house in town and pretend everything was normal. I'd act like the concerned father, grateful for Marcus's thoughtful suggestion to get the cabin inspected. I'd play the role of the aging widower who was none the wiser. But first, I had work to do. That night I sat in my workshop at home, surrounded by tools I'd collected over 5 decades. Ellen used to joke that I loved this room more than any other in the house. She wasn't wrong. Every saw, every plane, every chisel had a story, and every single one of them reminded me of teaching Marcus how to use them. He'd been 8 years old when I let him use his first hand saw, 16 when I taught him to operate the table saw, 20 when we built his first apartment's kitchen cabinets together. I'd been so proud. Where had I gone wrong? I pulled out my files from the cabinet Ellen had organized years ago. Insurance policies, will documents, property deeds. Everything was there, meticulously labeled in her careful handwriting. I found what I was looking for in a folder marked cabin. The property deed showed I'd bought the land for $40,000 in 1995. According to the latest tax assessment, it was now worth $800,000. Prime lakefront, accessible road, existing structure. A developer's dream. I opened my laptop, something Ellen had taught me to use in her last years when she'd been too weak to do her own online shopping. It took me a while, but I found what I was looking for. A real estate listing from 6 months ago. Prime lakefront development opportunity. The photo showed land that looked remarkably similar to my 5 acres. The listing price, $1.2 million. Then I found the business registration. Morrison Properties, LLC, filed 3 months ago. The registered agent, Marcus Morrison. The business address, his home. My son had formed a development company. My son, who'd barely had $50,000 in savings the last time we'd talked about money. My son, who worked as a middle manager at a software company and was always complaining about expenses. I dug deeper, found loan applications, preliminary architectural drawings for luxury lakefront condos, partnership agreements with contractors. Everything was ready to go. Everything except the one thing he needed most. The land. My land. But it was the next document that made my blood run cold. A life insurance policy I didn't remember signing. $1 million. With Marcus as the sole beneficiary. My signature was at the bottom, but I had no memory of signing it. The date was 2 months after Ellen's funeral. I remembered that day now. Marcus and Janet had brought over paperwork for me to sign. Just updating your information, Dad. Standard stuff after Mom passed. I'd been so deep in grief, I'd barely looked at what I was signing. I sat back in my chair, the weight of betrayal settling over me like a heavy tarp. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated, planned, methodical. My son had spent 6 months setting up my death. The old me would have broken down, would have cried, raged, maybe even confronted Marcus immediately. But 45 years as a carpenter had taught me patience. You don't rush a job. You measure twice, cut once. You plan every step before you make the first mark. So I made my own plan. The next morning, I called Marcus, kept my voice light, slightly confused. Hey, son, that inspector came by yesterday. Said there's some structural issues with the cabin. Nothing major, but he wants to do a more thorough check. Oh? Marcus's voice was careful. Too careful. What kind of issues? Something about the support beams in the basement. Probably just age, you know how it is. Building's 30 years old. Anyway, I'm going to stay here in town for a week while he does his thing. Actually, I was hoping you and Janet might want to come over for dinner tomorrow. I've been meaning to talk to you about some financial stuff. There was a pause. Financial stuff? Yeah, I've been thinking about what Janet said. About estate planning. You're right. I should probably update some things. Make sure everything's in order. I let a tremor creep into my voice. Getting old, Marcus. Facing my mortality, I guess. Of course, Dad. His voice warmed up, became the concerned son again. We'd love to come over. 6 o'clock? Perfect. See you then. I hung up and looked at the phone for a long moment. Then I called my old friend Richard Chen. We'd worked together on dozens of habitat builds. He was a retired family attorney, still sharp as the day we'd met. Rich, I need a favor, and I need you to keep it quiet. Bob, what's going on? I need to update my will. Quickly. And I need you to prepare something else. A revocable trust, I think it's called. Can you come over today? By the time Marcus and Janet arrived the next evening, I had my pieces in place. The cabin was rigged with security cameras James had helped me install, hidden in every room. My will had been updated, with copies filed with Richard and in a safe deposit box Marcus didn't know about. The trust was established, with specific provisions that would only make sense later. I'd also called my niece, Sarah. She lived in Colorado, and we hadn't talked much since Ellen's funeral. But she'd been the daughter Ellen and I never had, and she deserved to know what was happening. Uncle Bob, are you okay? Her voice had been full of concern when I'd explained everything. I am now, I'd told her. But I need you to be ready. You might need to fly out here in a few days. Now, watching Marcus and Janet walk up to my front door, I took a deep breath. The carpenter in me appreciated the irony. I'd spent my life building things. Now I was going to build a case. Dinner was pot roast, Ellen's recipe. I'd made it 100 times. Could do it in my sleep. We sat at the kitchen table, and I watched Marcus and Janet exchange glances as I served. So, Dad, Marcus started, cutting into his meat. You mentioned wanting to talk about financial planning? I did. I set down my fork. I've been thinking a lot since your mother passed. About what's important. About what I want my legacy to be. That's very wise, Janet said, her smile perfectly practiced. It's important to have everything in order. Exactly. I pulled out a folder, one I'd prepared carefully. So I've made some decisions. I wanted you to be the first to know. I watched Marcus lean forward, watched the greed flicker in his eyes before he hid it behind concern. I'm selling the cabin. The words hung in the air like sawdust after a cut. What? Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. The cabin. I'm selling it. That Inspector James, he said the repairs would cost more than it's worth. And honestly, without your mother, it just makes me sad to be there. So I'm selling to a conservation trust. They'll preserve the land, keep it natural. It's what Ellen would have wanted. Janet's face had gone pale. A conservation trust? But Bob, that's not. You could get so much more if you... If I what? I looked at her calmly. Sold to a developer? Let them bulldoze the place Ellen and I built with our own hands? Covered in condos? That's not what Janet meant, Marcus said quickly. We just want to make sure you get fair value, Dad. Oh, I will. The trust is offering $600,000. Under market, sure, but it comes with a tax deduction and the knowledge that our land stays protected. I smiled. Plus, I've been thinking about what to do with that money. I'm going to donate most of it to Habitat for Humanity, in Ellen's name. Most of it? Marcus's voice had an edge now. Well, I need to live on something. But yes, most of it. Maybe 500,000. They can build a lot of houses with that. I watched him carefully. Unless you think I shouldn't? No, of course not. It's your money, Dad. It's just... Marcus struggled to find words that wouldn't reveal what he was really thinking. It's a big decision. Maybe you should take more time. I don't have time, son. None of us do. Look at your mother. Here one day, gone the next. I let my voice crack slightly. I need to do something meaningful with what I have left. Make a difference before I'm gone. Janet excused herself to the bathroom. I heard her whispering urgently on her phone in the hallway. Marcus sat across from me, his jaw clenched. "When are you planning to do this?" he finally asked. "The trust paperwork is ready. I'm signing next week." I looked him in the eye. "Why? Is there a problem?" "No, no problem." But his hands were fisted on the table. They left shortly after, barely touching their dessert. I watched their car pull away, and then sat in the silence of my empty house. The house where I'd raised a son who was now planning my murder. The house where Ellen and I had laughed and fought and loved for 38 years. I allowed myself 5 minutes. 5 minutes to feel the grief, the betrayal, the soul-deep hurt of knowing my own child wanted me dead. Then I got back to work. Over the next 3 days, James completed his inspection of the cabin. The evidence was damning. The support beams had been cut with a saw that matched the one in Marcus's garage. The security cameras I'd installed caught him and Janet entering the cabin 2 days after our dinner, checking the beams, discussing how long they thought the structure would last. "Maybe another month," Janet's voice was clear on the recording, "especially with that storm coming. Perfect timing." "Did you cancel the Conservation Trust deal?" Marcus's voice. "He hasn't signed yet. We just need him back in the cabin for a few days. Then it won't matter." I watched the footage with Richard and James. Sarah had flown in that morning and sat beside me, holding my hand. "I'm sorry, Uncle Bob," she whispered. "Don't be sorry for him. He made his choices." I looked at Richard. "I need you to do something for me." The next day, I called Marcus. "Change of plans on the cabin sale. I'm having second thoughts." "Really?" The hope in his voice made me sick. "Yeah, you were right. I was being too hasty. So I'm going up there this weekend, going to spend some time, really think about what Ellen would want." "Dad, I don't think that's safe," the inspector said. The inspector said it needed repairs, not that it was going to fall down tomorrow. "I'll be careful. Just need a few days to clear my head. Let me come with you." "No." I made my voice firm. "I need to do this alone, Marcus. You understand." There was a long pause. "Okay, Dad, but please be careful." "I will, son. I promise." I didn't go to the cabin that weekend. Instead, I went to the police station with James, Richard, Sarah, and every piece of evidence we'd collected. The recordings, the sabotaged beams, the forged life insurance policy, the business documents, all of it. The detective who took my statement was a woman in her 40s named Maria Santos. She listened to everything, watched the videos, examined the photos. "Mr. Morrison, I need to ask you something," she said finally. "Why didn't you come forward immediately when you found out?" "Because I needed to be sure," I told her, "and because I needed to understand why. I spent 6 months teaching my son to ride a bike, to tie his shoes, to use a hammer without hitting his thumb. I spent 18 years raising him to be a good man. I needed to know what happened to that boy." "And did you find out?" "I found out he's not that boy anymore. And that's on him, not me." They arrested Marcus and Janet 3 days later. The evidence was overwhelming. The trial took 4 months. I sat through every day of it, watching my son's face as witness after witness testified. James described the sabotaged beams. The insurance investigator confirmed the forged policy. The forensic accountant laid out the development scheme. On the witness stand, Janet broke first. Blamed everything on Marcus, said she was just going along with his plan. Marcus stayed silent until the end, until the prosecutor asked him directly, "Did you cut those support beams in your father's cabin, knowing he would be staying there, knowing the structure would collapse?" Marcus looked at me for the first time since the trial started. He was going to give it all away. "Everything my mother and I worked for. That cabin was supposed to be mine. I built it with him. I earned it." "You built it with him?" The prosecutor's voice was sharp. "According to your father's testimony, you helped for 2 summers when you were a teenager. Your father spent 30 years building that cabin. He was giving it to strangers." Marcus's composure cracked. "My mother just died, and all he could think about was his legacy. What about my future? What about what I deserved? And you deserved it enough to kill him for it?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, fraud, forgery. Janet got 12 years. Marcus got 25. When the verdict was read, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a vast, empty grief for the son I'd lost long before any of this started. After the trial, Richard helped me execute the plan I'd put in place. The cabin didn't go to a conservation trust. It went to a foundation I'd established to provide housing for elderly people who'd been abused or exploited by their own families. Sarah helped me run it. James volunteered as a building inspector, checking every structure for safety. I sold my house in town and moved into a small apartment attached to the foundation's main building. Spent my days teaching carpentry to young people who wanted to learn a trade, who reminded me that not everyone turns out like Marcus. The hardest part was the letters. Marcus wrote to me from prison, dozens of them. At first they were angry, blaming me for everything. Then they became pleading, asking for forgiveness, for understanding. I read every one. Didn't answer most of them. But 2 years into his sentence, one letter was different. Dad, I've been in therapy here. Court ordered at first, but I've kept going. I'm starting to understand some things about how I let myself become someone I'm not, about how I justified what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself, but I wanted you to know that I finally see it, what I threw away, what I destroyed, and I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. I held that letter for a long time. Then I picked up a pen and wrote back for the first time. Marcus, I forgive you. Not because what you did was forgivable, but because holding on to this anger is like drinking poison and expecting you to die. You're my son. You always will be. But you're also the man who tried to kill me, and I have to live with both of those truths. I hope your therapy helps you live with them too. I didn't visit him in prison. Maybe that makes me a bad father. But I couldn't. Every time I thought about it, I saw those carefully cut support beams. The precision of a son using skills his father taught him to plan his father's death. Instead, I built. I built homes for people who'd been betrayed. I built workshops for kids who needed a safe place to learn. I built a legacy that Ellen would have been proud of. And every time I picked up a hammer, every time I made a clean cut through a piece of wood, I thought about what my old mentor used to say. Measure twice, cut once. Because once it's cut, you can't put it back together the same way. Marcus cut our relationship. And try as I might, I couldn't put it back together the same way. The best I could do was build something new from the pieces that remained. 5 years after the trial, Sarah and I were in the workshop when a young man in his 20s approached me. Mr. Morrison? I'm David. I'm one of the scholarship students. I wanted to thank you for this program. My own dad kicked me out when I was 16. This place saved my life. I shook his hand, feeling the calluses from honest work. You saved your own life, David. I just gave you some tools. Will you teach me how to build a cabinet? I want to make something for my foster mom. She deserves something beautiful. I smiled, feeling something in my chest that wasn't quite happiness but was close enough. I'd be honored. Let's start with measuring. Because in carpentry and in life, you've got to measure twice. Cut once, David finished, grinning. That's right. I handed him a tape measure. That's exactly right. And we got to work.